Yeah, there are yahoos shouting about, we don't want those rapists invading our country. But there are also people like me who say a country needs to control who comes into it. That's a first order necessity of good governance, having control over your border. It's not against anybody to want to be able to say yes or no to who enters my country. That's my prerogative. We are a country here.
The smart take these days from people on, maybe the center left or the center is that we must take seriously this MAGA ideology and its effect on so many people. And, what everybody's thinking now, including more and more Black and Latino people, pumping their fists along with everybody else. To just dismiss it is elitist and not constructive, because a lot of them, I'm told, feel that elitism. And as I've said, it's never intuitive to me that they're really listening to what we're saying, but I'm open to the argument. But do you see an analogy between what we or I have sometimes said about what's supposed to be genuinely Black and what's supposed to be MAGA, in that it seems that whatever is supposed to be Black and not white is always easier. And so the idea is, well, Black people don't have to get the exact answer in math. Black physics is going to be intuitive. It's never that the Black version is harder, except maybe with elaborate rhythm. That's literally the only thing I can think of. Everything else, Black is easier. MAGA is easier. And so it's easier to think, let's get out of Ukraine because it doesn't look like they can win. And why do we care anyway? And, well, Putin at least has a certain charismatic power. It's easy to say lower taxes and then to have a certain, if I may, and this is more your department than mine, a simplistic sense of how economics works. I did it very quickly. It's always easier. And I wonder if there's a polite way to address the MAGA idea, where it seems to me that the idea from the Biden world is a little less intuitive, but perhaps more constructive in the long term than this MAGA notion of keep all these filthy people out, lower taxes, et cetera. You notice that MAGA is easier? That's what worries me about these things.
That's interesting. I don't think I agree. I think I understand. There's certain pat simplistic certitudes and nostrums that can coalesce into a full political program that people will find it attractive to get behind. Waving that banner of Black Lives Matter and structural racism with the balled up fist of it, nothing has changed since 1863 and America is a racist country, is an easy response on the part of African Americans, those intellectuals and activists who take that posture, to the complex problems of persistent disparities and underrepresentation and poverty and homicide and whatnot. They take the easy route. The harder route would be the engaging with the complexities and recognizing the necessity to make certain kinds of choices and to affirm certain values, even though they might be uncomfortable, like you need cops in the cities to maintain order, or like meritocratic standards are something that everybody has an interest in preserving. And you have to do the diversity problem within the constraints of maintaining meritocratic standards. And you don't want to reify race too much. So there's a complex take on race and there's the simplistic take on race. The people with three names take the simplistic route. Smart people like me and you take the complex route. And now you're trying to make an analogy between that where I agree, we're smart and we're right. And you're saying that substitute for the Black, pat, easy structural racism solution, the MAGA, populist, America first, a kind of Trumpian vision. And you're saying that is too easy by half, too easy on the immigration question, too easy on the foreign policy question, too easy on the economic question. And they're getting behind nostrums that are easy to convert into bumper stickers, but that are not serious engagement problem. What do I think about that? No, I don't agree. I think, let's be concrete. You wanted to take Ukraine. We could take Ukraine. I'll admit to listening to people like John Mearsheimer, the political scientist at the University of Chicago, who talks about it. I'll admit to listening to people like Judge Andrew Napolitano, the podcast guy who's a relative conservative. He has people like Mearsheimer, people like Jeffrey Sachs, the economics professor at your Columbia University, who is very skeptical about Ukraine. What they say about Ukraine is we push NATO up to Russia's border. Putin told us that they wouldn't live with that. They are a superpower who have to be reckoned with in the modern world. We wouldn't allow it on our border. and they have a long story, and it goes back to overthrowing governments in Kiev and all of that. And I'm not an expert, but bottom line is Putin ought to have been accommodated. When he put his foot down, we ought to have stopped short. We didn't. In a way, we provoked this war. It's a war that we could never win because structurally, Russia is 5 or 6 times as big a country, and it's got a manpower and an industrial capacity thing, and blah, blah, blah. It's become a war of attrition. It's a war of attrition that Ukraine is losing. We basically put our head in a noose with the threat of escalation to the potential use of nuclear weapons, and it's not a confrontation that we need or whatever. So that's a take on Ukraine. I don't think there's anything, I mean, it might be right, it might be wrong. It's the kind of take that a guy like Mearsheimer or a guy like Jeffrey Sachs and many others are putting out there. I find that there may be some merit in it. Certainly the claim that we can prevail in this war of attrition with Russia is becoming less and less credible. Certainly the certitude that we brought to, well, we're going to put sanctions on Russia and we're going to cripple their economy, the ruble will be worth nothing, and Russia will be a bankrupt basket case in short order has proven to be untrue. It does look like Russia and China have grown closer together as a consequence of reactions to events that we are instrumental in perpetuating in terms of the conflict that has ensued in Ukraine, et cetera. I don't really see that as in any way analogous to an under-theorized, overly simplistic, pat account. It's an account. So, I would offer that as point, and now just say one other thing about the border. Yeah, there are yahoos shouting about, we don't want those rapists invading our country. But there are also people like me who say a country needs to control who comes into it. That's a first order necessity of good governance, having control over your border. It's not against anybody to want to be able to say yes or no to who enters my country. That's my prerogative. We are a country here. I find that to be a very clear, compelling first principle from which one could develop a critique of the Democratic Party's reaction to the problems of immigration and support for at least some of what the MAGA people want to do at the border. They want control over the border. They want to know who's coming into their country. I think that's a reasonable position. I don't see that as being analogous to structural racism simplicity at all. So that's what I'd say.
I hear you. And of course, there are principled arguments for not supporting Ukraine here for the long term. I fully get that. But as you're implying, the easier view, the bumper sticker view is, what the fuck are we paying, them for? They're losing. Fuck it. That's easy, and it's America first-ish and a little bit xenophobic. That's not Mearsheimer, no, but that is an easy way to feel. Or with immigrants, you have long, had a sense that we need to have a real discussion about immigration. You are hardly alone in that. That view goes, quite left of center in the intelligence sense, but there can also be, get those filthy people out of here who come in and they're illegal and they do this and they do that. And that is, again, that's the bumper sticker. And it seems that so much of the MAGA position is reducible to that sort of thing. Whereas, for example, racism hasn't changed since 1963 or even 1863. Yes, there are plenty of people who are saying that. And yes, it's hopelessly oversimplified. It basically is a way of refraining from grappling with the complexities of reality. But the thing is, even among the people who say that, they seem to have a certain awareness that people need to be carefully taught that, to use the phrase carefully taught in a way that it wasn't originally. You have to be carefully taught that racism hasn't changed, because obviously it has. So you're supposed to read certain books written by the three named people. You're supposed to listen to MSNBC. You're supposed to, quote unquote, do the work in order to understand this. Now, the idea that racism hasn't changed and you don't have to back it up, you're just kind of grunting it out, that doesn't lend itself to a bumper sticker as much. It seems that what the left is going for, even if it is oversimplified, the idea is that you are supposed to do some work in order to pretend to believe this oversimplified nonsense. And so it seems to me that the left requires you to work harder. The right doesn't require you to learn about Ukraine or to learn about what's happened in Palestine since the 1920s. The idea is just, here's what we think, and everybody's hooing out in the audience. Less of that on the left, and it's partly because the ideas are less susceptible to being thought of as that viscerally obvious. They're less about get rid of those weaker people They're less about strength. If anything, the left is about, getting away from the idea that strength is everything. Does that make any sense?